All right, so here we're going to talk about more in terms of the circulatory system. And one of the things that's important to see in terms of the difference between arteries and veins is their structure and their function. So you got to think a little bit about how arteries and veins exist and how they're different. Let me give you an example. Arteries are leaving the heart. Since they're leaving the heart, they are generally under much more pressure, like actual water pressure, fluid pressure, because the heart is pumping and therefore it's pumping blood at a higher rate of pressure. So if you had a faucet, right, if you're going to take blood from someone and you took it from an artery, that blood would come out very, 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 very fast. And they tend to not do that because they don't want lots and lots and lots of blood to fly out of it. So if you cut an artery, that would be a much more serious blood loss event. It's got a lot more smooth muscle to keep the vessel from popping. Um, the walls, the endothelium, endo meaning inside, is a little thicker to hold the pressure, and it's got a bit more connective tissue. Veins, on the other hand, is the return. It's coming back from the body towards the heart. So arteries are A away, veins are the return, and therefore, if veins are the return, then veins, what they have to deal with more is gravity. For example, once the blood gets to your feet, it has to go all the way back to your heart again. And since it has to go all the way back to your heart, that's a long way to go. And what it ends up having to do is, as it goes up towards your heart, the valves here stop the blood from flowing backwards into your vein. It kind of keeps it going in a straight direction. So they're generally under less pressure. They have less smooth muscle. They have less like fluid pressure in general, but at the same time, they have valves to prevent blood flow, backflow. Between arteries and veins, okay, between arteries and veins, you have a capillary bed. So veins break down into smaller, smaller, and smaller and smaller tubes. So it gets the capillaries. Arteries break down smaller, smaller, smaller tubes. So it gets capillaries, and then capillaries are these thin-walled little beds of vessels. So blood pressure now. If your blood pressure is too high, you can burst a capillary or burst a blood vessel, generally one of the branch off blood vessels. You generally will not burst a larger vessel. If the blood pressure is too low, it won't get to the different parts it needs to get to, especially coming back up against gravity. So, blood pressure is measured as the highest and lowest per beat. Because remember, your heart is contracting. It's not like a pump that gives you a consistent amount of effort. It spikes and then comes down, and then it spikes and then it comes down. Systolic is the peak. Diastolic is the flat. So when you have a systolic blood pressure, that is the number that is at the maximum when the left ventricle contracts, and diastolic is when the ventricles relax. It's when the blood pressure is the lowest. So it's no lower than 70 on this particular person, no higher than 120, depending on the where you are in the heart cycle. If it's a ventricle or is the ventricle contracting or is it relaxing? Too high of a blood pressure can lead to a heart attack or stroke. Too low of a blood pressure can lead to someone passing out, especially when they transition from sitting to standing, etc. Things that can increase the chances of you having circulatory disease: smoking, stress, weight, lack of exercise, lack of fruit. So, diet, exercise, stress, and smoking are just some of the things that can make a big deal here. Different diseases for the cardiovascular disease cause different problems. I want to remind you that cardiovascular disease in Americans is either the number one or the number two killer. It depends on the year. But one of the things that can happen is the arterial wall gets too thick and inflexible because of something called plaque buildups, which is cholesterol buildups within the the blood vessel wall here. That is a problem. It also narrows the blood vessels. You can see it looks unnaturally narrowed into the side. There's other things. There's actual blockages that can occur as plaque builds up. This tissue here will rip, and then the plaque that's underneath will cause a clot, a blood clot, and that is a terrible scenario. If that blood clot happens in your heart, it's a heart attack, or a if it happens in your brain, it's a stroke. Uh, the heart attack is myocardial infarction. It's a funny name, but it's still a heart attack. It can happen in your lungs. It can happen in your major muscles like your thigh muscle, etc. And you have the same sort of clotting. And whenever you have a clotting event, all the blood afterwards, like where the blood would go, all those cells start to die, and that's where you start getting the damage. And that's it for chapter 27, section 4.